That was when his eyes fell to the piece of paper that littered his desktop. It was the letter, the very same one that had come to him that day by the hands of his assistant, had brought him. His breathing began to slow, as he rubbed Jungkook back gently, who was coming down from his own high. When they were knotted, the Omega was extra vulnerable, clouded in a haze of pleasure and trust for his alpha. Gently, Taehyung pressed his lips to Jungkook's shoulder, holding him even tighter. The smell of the Omega was intermingled with his own scent, and it smelled like home. His entire body calmed as they rested upon each other, letting the stress of the workday leave entirely. Then, Taehyung thought of his mate's antics and all of the behaviors he'd participated in, and began to chuckle. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" Rough office cook hummed, and the alpha could feel a soft smile against his skin. "So naughty," Taehyung uttered, without any warning in his tone. He was proud of how often his Omega thought of having, happy with the way their life was unfolding. It was stupid really how idiotic they'd been in ignoring their soulmate bond. He knew how obvious Jungkook was meant to be wrapped in his arms forever, and he couldn't wait to make him his husband. His eyes scanned his desk again, falling on the envelope. He swallowed hard, the nerves twisting deep in his gut. The memory of the words written in that page haunting his mind now that he was free of ills. Taehyung knew he would need to tell Jungkook eventually about what was written on that piece of parchment. He just wasn't at all aware of how in the world he would manage to do such a thing. Everything already felt so messy. His own understanding of the issue was so convoluted, he had no idea how he would begin to explain it to his mate. He remembered the text he'd sent to his stepfather, June. A photograph of the contents written in the note. At first when he'd received it he thought it was a joke. Really, who waits 6 months to respond to a letter like the one he'd sent? His stepfather, which was still a weird concept, considering he'd only recently found out about the almost 6 years of marriage June. His mother shared. However, June had been an easy lad to get on with and had replied to the photo of the note almost as soon as he'd sent it. June. "You should tell Jungkook on Sunday. We've waited long enough." June had been trying to convince him to come clean about this whole ordeal for quite a while. The problem was, the alpha was breathlessly in love with his soulmate, falling harder and faster every day. He was so protective of the little one, it was hard for him to even think about another person potentially tearing into the happy ending. That didn't mean he hadn't been feeling guilty about it, about keeping it all from Jungkook. Still, Taehyung was sure there really wasn't a need for Jungkook to know about the information he'd found out until the alpha was sure that the inclusion of this new person would be a positive addition to their family. There were too many unknowns, so many questions that were swirling in his head. He knew it would only haunt Jungkook even more, and he just couldn't do that to him. Not without having the ability to comfort his mind. It was his life's work to ensure his mate was happy, healthy and taken care of. No one was going to hurt him, not even her. She'd had a chance to be there for him, and she'd failed. It was Taehyung's turn now to shield the Omega from the harsh reality of the world. The family they would build would be a bubble of serenity. No one was going to permeate it without his permission. Jungkook took in a sharp breath as Taehyung's fingers continued to dance along his spine. "You are right, Cookie," the alpha asked, and he could feel the slow decline of his knot. The Omega nodded, still under his wolf's haze. Lightly Taehyung hugged his mate tighter, shaking him slightly. "I love you, you know that, right?" "Yes, Alpha," Jungkook said, tantalizingly close to a groan. "I love you too," Taekook exhaled, breathing in the scent of his mate's skin. It was inebriating, better than anything he'd ever consumed. Just before his knot slipped out, he felt Jungkook's fingers wrap around one of the curls of his hair, and he knew the omega was coming out of it. Almost as if he was making his grand re-entrance to reality, Jungkook groaned. "Great," Taekook laughed, his head falling back. "Of course you're." He pressed his fingers into Jungkook's soft curves before kissing his nose. "Let's get you dressed first, then food. Too much work." Jungkook rested his head in the crevice of Taekook's shoulders and jaw, and the alpha's heart grew even wider for the boy still on his lap. He sighed, knowing that Jungkook could get just about anything he wanted. This was the exact reason Taekook was reaching out onto his desk, grabbing a few tissues and cleaning both himself and his mate before lifting the boy and planting his feet onto the floor. "When it comes to you," Taekook's voice dropped in octaves as his hands clutched the boy's waist again, brushing their noses together. "Always." Jungkook's eyes fluttered back open, those beautiful black irises looking up at him with wonder. Taekook bit the inside of his cheek, struggling not to fall to pieces in the presence of his omega. Whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, Jungkook could have it all. "Can we get tacos please?" Jungkook asked. "From that food truck down the road? The one that has those fish tacos you really like?" Taekook's heart thudded madly. His omega was so horrible it almost always made him weak. "Yes baby," he kissed his forehead. "We can." Making their way out of the dark and desolate office building, hand in hand, they turned in the direction of Jungkook's favorite food. Taekook was determined to ignore the vibration in his pocket. He knew who was texting him and why, and that was a topic of conversation he would very much like to avoid. "Will you eat the guacamole this time?" Taekook asked, wrapping his arm around Jungkook's shoulders. "Absolutely not," the omega scoffed. "That shit's vile." It was Taekook's turn to roll his eyes. "You just don't like the texture of avocado." Another thing he was learning about his omega was just how much of a picky eater he really was. Not eating it, Jungkook stuck to his stubborn quality. "Fine," Taekook kissed his cheek. "You don't have to." One day though, Jungkook shoved Taekook away jokingly, a smitten smirk upon his face. Not happening. They laughed together, walking through the last few hours of sunlight the summer day had to offer. They retrieved their tacos and cup full of guacamole, Jungkook having convinced Taekook to also get the queso dip for their crisps as well. They sat upon a picnic table, basking in the warm August night air, as the beautiful pink and orange hues of the sunset paint their date. The omega took the liberty of taking the lime on Taekook's plate and squeezing it over his tacos. Taekook smiled gratefully before dipping a crisp into the queso and feeding it to Jungkook. Everything was right between them. Nothing would ever come between them again. As they walked back to their car, the alpha pulled out his phone. "Seo Jun, just found out she's announcing her candidacy for Prime Minister next week." "Seo Jun, I know you wanted to wait until she gave you some answers, but I think we're out of time." Taekook swallowed as he opened the door for his love. He attempted a smile as Jungkook thanked him and slipped inside. The alpha knew his stepfather was right. They were out of time, and Taekook had no answers to give his mate. As he walked around the back of his vehicle, he quickly sent a reply. "Taekook, all right. We'll tell him Sunday." He sighed at the crescent moon that hung in the sky, and wished to every god that could hear his thoughts, that nothing would go wrong. He couldn't afford for it to. He had far too much to lose. How many of us does it take to put a crib together? Jungkook groaned silently to himself as he leaned against the wall in the nursery of Seokjin and Namjoon's new home.